I was recently reading the Rolling Stone and I came across the headline, How to Pivot Your Cannabis Company When Industry Challenges Come Your Way. I thought I might have an idea of what this article was about, and my suspicions were confirmed by the subline. For those on the fence about diving into these hemp infused waters, I say, put on your life vest and start swimming. Folks, today I'll be speaking to the author about this article, what they meant, and so much more. Folks, you're listening to the Cole Memo. I'm your host, Cole Preston. Every episode is released in audio, video, and transcript format. To find the transcript, audio, or video version of any episode, please refer to the description of the episode that you're listening to now. Within that description, you can find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. If you're unable to locate the episode description on whichever platform you're listening from, I get it. Platforms change all the time, and it's kind of hard to know where they tuck those episode descriptions. So if you can't find it, simply note the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. From there, you can find the corresponding episode, and then you'll be able to access the audio, video, or transcript version of that episode. You might also find any links that we referenced during the episode, like the one I just read, or the article that I just read, rather, so that you might be able to do your own research. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, then you're listening to this episode later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. Once again, that's thecolememo.com/Patreon. It's a great way to support our show. It only costs $3 a month and you get episodes as they release. One of the best ways to support our show, however, is free. Subscribe to or follow our show, leave us a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, post a review, tell your friends about it. Your engagement and support is appreciated. Today is December 20th, 2023. I don't know why I just about said August. I'm joined by Alissa Jubelirer. Allie, how's it going today? Oh, and you're muted. Sorry, you're still muted because I asked you.
Whoops. Sorry. Hi. No, it's going well. Thank you. And you got my last name right. So good job.
Ooh, hell yeah. Off to a good start already. Well, really quick, I just want to lay a little bit of foundation here. And then I want to have you actually go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll lay the foundation. How would you introduce yourself if we just, I mean, we're encountering each other right now. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Um, well, I am a lawyer by background. I actually graduated from Loyola here in Chicago in 2000 and spent most of my career practicing law either at a law firm or in-house. So I was at Tribune back in the day, and then went to Groupon after that, and left Groupon in 2019 to become the general counsel of Revolution Cannabis here in Chicago, which I like to describe as the smallest of the big MSOs and still privately held. I was there for about 2 years, and then that second year is when COVID hit, and I ended up leaving. I like to say the wheels kind of came off during COVID with the kids coming home from remote learning and everybody kind of reevaluating their lives. So I ended up leaving Revolution, and for about a year after that, I was doing legal consulting work in both tech and cannabis. So I was acting as the outside general counsel for a cashless payment platform called AeroPay for about a year, and also just working with other clients. And then during that time, I kept watching the New Mexico market because of some personal connections that I had there, and saw that they were coming online for adult use, and decided that I was going to give it a shot and put a team together to apply for licenses in New Mexico.
Very cool.
And off we went. And
Off.
that was the inception of Dynamic Jack, which is a cannabis company that I now run in New Mexico.
Very cool. Very cool. Dynamic Jack. Do you want to shout out the website for that, or if anybody wants to check it out?
Yes. Also, I'd love for my dog to stop barking in the background. It's www.dynamicjack.co. And you can check out our line of products and more about us there.
Sweet. And I don't even think I heard your dog barking. So the
Okay, well,
the
that's
noise
good.
cancellation must be working out. Um,
That's good.
so here's how I think I'd like to lay the foundation for this. And maybe we can kick things off. I want to give you the floor. How would you explain, and you have this in your article, so people can see a text explanation of this as well, but how would you explain what the difference between hemp and marijuana is? Can we start with that?
Yes. And it's funny because everybody that I talk to describe has different words that they use to define the difference, which of course is complicated because the plant is the same plant. It's sativa L, cannabis
Right.
sativa L is the scientific name of the plant. So I call it regulated cannabis, and then I call it hemp D9. But I always have to kind of explain it, and neither one is really correct, I guess. But that's how I talk about it. And of course, the difference is what is legal and what is not legal under the Farm Bill. So the hemp is like a legislative construct, essentially, that has deemed the cannabis plant to be hemp if it meets certain THC levels or lack thereof, I guess.
Yeah. The way I like to describe it is like there's a fence right here, and on this side of the fence, you've got your legal terms. Keyword legal terms, marijuana and hemp, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
choose to call the plant either of those names. Because on the other side of the fence, you have your scientific terms. So in other words, we're talking about cannabis here, but we're talking about
Yes,
almost like arbitrary definitions that we've made for the plant. Would you agree with
yes,
that? And like you said, based off of
totally.
the key thing is like you say, based off of the amount of THC that's in it by dry weight. Is that right? Or
Yes, yes, that's correct. 0.3%, dry weight. And that's, the loophole, right? Because everybody read that restriction and then decided what would that look like if it was not dry weight and what could we kind of get away with. And that's how the loophole in the Farm Bill was born. Um, I don't call it. I'll tell you one other thing on the language. I actually don't use the word marijuana because I feel like it derives from sort of racist, terminology and the history of the plant. So that's another reason why. Because it would be very easy. I know a lot of people do say like marijuana and hemp, and I just won't. I don't like using the word marijuana, so I avoid it.
yeah, totally with you there. Totally with you right there. Another this is a graphic explanation that I like to show from a comic artist. His name is Box Brown, and it just really helped it click for me. Um, I'll give you a moment to take it this in. And maybe could you tell our
Mhm.
listeners, do you agree with what you're seeing right now?
Let's see. The language has been extrapolated to mean that any hemp product with less than 0.3% THC by weight is, in fact, legal hemp. Yes.
So I like this graphic representation because it shows that these companies seem to have figured out, if you make most of it, gelatin, sugar, even CBD or
Mm-hmm.
cornstarch, if you just keep a little sliver of it, THC, it's a
Mm-hmm.
legal product, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I would say even that a lot of manufacturers have taken that much further, in terms of extracting 0.3% THC out of these plants that are grown for low THC, right, in the first place. And then kind of replicating that over and over and over again until you get, hemp D9, distillate that's as intoxicating as regulated cannabis distillate.
Yeah.
It's just a function of extracting and concentrating the amounts down, and then it's the same thing. So
Yeah.
it's
And
it's fascinating.
it really is. And I think this gets to the point of your article that maybe I can really open up the floor for you here because I just loved everything about what you had to say about this. And I really think it's becoming almost irresponsible not to get into the hemp space if you are a cannabis operator. And so, just to lay some foundation here, a few tweets that have really caught my attention. Chris Becker from the Honeybee Collective said, I just talked to a bank that will take deposits from and provide funding for Farm Bill authorized businesses, including THCA hemp. Between that, the Farm Bill extension, and state prohibitions on hemp being decimated in court, the hemp space is almost irresistible. Then you have
Yep.
people like Snoop Dogg getting into the THCA vape and D9 THC drink arena. You've also got people like
Mhm.
Tommy Chong and Cheech Marine getting
Yep.
in there. And then
Yep.
the icing on the cake, you've got a big cannabis brand, one of the most well known, I'd argue, Cookies, selling THCA through the mail. Um,
And 1906 just jumped in too. Did you see that? That they're launching all of their cute little, I call them pills. I don't know if they're really called pills, but launching all of those with MD9 so they can sell them online, direct to
yeah.
consumer.
So
Yeah.
what made you write the article? Was it that? Was it that idea that it's just becoming irresistible and it's like sink or swim, baby? Piss or get off the pot, you know?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I was lucky to have like a front row seat a little bit to the evolution of all of this in real time because of a group that I'm involved in of some really amazing women, some of whom are in the beverage space, some who are in the gummy space. And um, I just, it was, to me, it was like a dirty little secret that the cannabis beverages were all getting into this space and nobody was talking about it. And so when I finally talked to one of the CEOs of those companies and she kind of explained to me what had been going on, like my mind was a little bit blown because up until that point, I think I saw when you flashed on the screen, and I know Chris, he's great. And I saw it lower in the comments. He put something like, I used to be such a prude, I think, about like Hemp
Yeah.
D9. And that was what it was. It was like when we would talk about it before, it was like, oh, Hemp D9, it's the worst thing, and MD8 and all the other, it's anything that's not regulated cannabis is scary, dangerous, unregulated, gross, and beneath, the regulated cannabis industry and all of us operators who fought, tooth and nail and, blood, sweat, and tears to get our businesses started. And then these guys just like roll up with some hemp D9 gummies and put them in a corner store, So it was a lot of like, looking down our noses at hemp D9 in general. And there was good reason to do it. A lot of it is unregulated and could be very dangerous. I would not like to find out that the hemp D9 gummies I'm consuming are made in somebody's garage in, Texas somewhere and like with people with no sanitary requirements of any kind. And, I'd be more worried, honestly, about getting like some salmonella or something nasty from those things than like what the THC would do to me. On the other hand, the THC is way stronger than it used to be when I was a kid, when I was in college. And um, it is dangerous that kids can walk into a store and get, a giant bag of gummies and end up in the hospital having a panic attack, Um, so I think the key and what I was really wanting to say in that article is two things. Number one is like, we don't really have a choice because the way that the system is set up, we're all set up to fail essentially as regulated cannabis operators. And we do have, we have a fiduciary duty, a lot of us, to our investors and the people that put their faith in us. And so we have to explore, every conceivable legal option to keep our businesses alive. And so that's part of it. And then the other part of it is leaning into compliance. As these bigger players get in the game, the hemp D9 and hemp D8 and other cannabinoid processors will have to level up. And they're already doing it. So once they're at a place where they're testing the same and you're getting the same COAs and that everything's being created in the same way that it would be created in a regulated, cannabis licensed facility, then unless you're, maybe a constitutional, strict constitutionalist and have decided that the farm bill loophole is not a line you're willing to cross, there's no reason to not get in it. Sorry, that probably didn't come out completely
No,
articulate, but
I followed you actually, and you said some things that I'm really happy that it sounds like you've had like an evolution of thought because maybe you can take me through it because
Hmm.
I'm trying to understand the people that look down at their nose at it because frankly, uh, I can pull up a quote our head regulator recently said, but she said something to the effect of everybody thinks that hemp and Delta 8 is the devil. They only ever say hemp and Delta 8, by the way. They never talk about Delta 9.
D9.
These,
I
yeah,
know, it's so weird,
they
which
always
is the
choose,
more intoxicating of the two, right?
right,
Between D8 and D9.
right. They always choose
Right.
D8. And she said,
Hmm.
and I quote, 95% of our problems go away if the federal government closes the loophole. Um, and I'm just, uh, well, so just in the case of Illinois, I want to make it clear that, you know, the idea is that these products are sold at a lower. Um, Here's what she said. These products either go untaxed or are only subject to retail level taxation, making them more affordable than cannabis. This harms our social equity licensees. So Illinois has a little bit of a unique argument. They're arguing that because these products are cheaper, we're harming
They're undercutting. Hmm.
licensees. Yeah, getting undercutting. But
Hmm.
can you just take me through the evolution of thought where can we start to where you were looking down on these hemp
Yeah.
operators and kind of go through like what changed your mind or what? Yeah.
Well, I think it is this concept that as a regulated operator, like I said before, we've gone through, hell and high water, a lot of us to get our businesses going. And much of that is because of the regulations and the fees and the things that we have no choice but to do. Um, and so there is this unfairness of like, we've worked so hard to even get to where we are today. And then you guys just waltz on in here and start selling competitive products at half the price. And like, how are we going to, how can we compete with that? So there is that part of it. My answer to that is like, life is tough. So we didn't know. We all went through what we went through, and here we are, right? Um, it's not a good enough reason to not explore it. Um, but that's definitely like the mentality of like, you guys don't know and half of what we know. You haven't been through half of what we've been through. And then the second part of it was the unregulatedness of it, right? Like what, not having any regulations around how these things are made. It's just you have no idea what people are, how they're being made, what facilities they're being made in. You don't even know, honestly. I mean, you don't know if the COAs, there's nobody like most hemp products have, they do tests and there's like QR codes on the packaging and things like that, but you don't know. I mean, they could be like made up tests. Nobody's looking at them. They're doing it because they think that, and they're not wrong, that consumers would like to see what's in their product, but you don't know if it's real. And there's no oversight. You know what I'm saying? So that piece of it is really scary. And then what that means is that your average consumer has no idea what the difference is between any of this stuff. They walk into a store and they see D8 or D9 and they're like, huh, thought I could only get that in a dispensary. I guess not. Let me try it. So they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. On the operator side, we do know. And so what it says to me is that we're really left to police ourselves, right? So, in other words, if I'm going to jump into the hemp D9 space, it's up to me to find and do my due diligence with a manufacturer that I trust and that I think is doing things compliantly and above board and with testing and sanitary methods and SOPs and the whole thing. Um, but I don't think that that second argument's wrong. I mean, I would venture to say the vast majority of hemp manufacturers are probably doing the bare minimum when it comes to those things because it's expensive. And they're certainly not, I don't think, checking when they sell their products to stores whether the stores are carding kids when they walk in. Um, in a dispensary, it's everything is much tighter. So there's far less fear that a kid's going to get their hands on that stuff unless somebody goes to the dispensary and buys it for them. So that was kind of all the stuff that we were fed, and that we were told. It's dangerous, it's gross, it's sells in inferior like stores, like the smoke shops aren't nearly as nice as, the
Hmm.
dispensaries. And um and like, screw them. We went through a lot to get here. So we're not going to embrace these products or these people or this new, this new method of making these intoxicating cannabinoids.
Yeah. And what, if we could take me through it again, what was it that flipped the switch? And by the way, thank you for being willing to talk about an evolution and path. I think there are so many people that are just doubling down on whatever stance they're taking, whether it be for or against this stuff. And to
Yeah.
to hear somebody that is fluid in their thought and open to ideas, obviously, is really refreshing. So what was it that ultimately took all of what you just said and you were like,
Turned it on its head.
yeah, you're like, I
Yeah.
think I'm going to do this.
It was talking to my friend at the beverage company when she
Yeah.
kind of let me in on this like secret that I didn't know, that like all these beverage companies were using hemp D9. And I'm like, what? And that's what made me decide to go and sell my cookie dough, which was being made, my with Rude Girl Goodies was one of our sub brands under Dynamic Jack, and it's cookie dough that we made in New Mexico with regulated cannabis distillate made from our farm. And after talking to, and that's when I got the idea of like, well, if they're selling beverages all over the country and they're doing it like online and in, other stores, why can't I? And that's when I talked to Lisa, learned what was really going on behind the scenes. And I was like, well, if they're all doing it, then I'm going to do it for my cookie dough. So that's where it really came from, this like me seeing the beverages, the ability suddenly for these beverages to go from one state to like 10 states, in a matter of months, was doing it with hemp D9. And they weren't, this one particular beverage couldn't even get out of the gate with national licensing and production of their drink, because none of the regulated cannabis operators wanted to invest in it because they were drowning like everybody. And also it required giving up space for a canning line and storage. I mean, beverages are not, they're kind of bulky products. And so you had these beverage companies that would start with regulated cannabis in one state and then could not get out of the gate in any kind of licensing or co-packing deal, and that's when they all finally turned to hemp D9. And but from the consumer perspective, like if you go on most of their websites, you wouldn't know. You would just be like, oh, it's all THC. Like, why can I order
Right.
this? Okay. And I think the confusion was like a little bit purposeful. And I don't think consumers quite get it. They just see it's THC. But if you and I circle back to the beginning of the conversation, it is just THC. So maybe
Right.
that's a good thing, that they don't understand all the difficulty of how that beverage ended up on the shelf in their dispensary or local store.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always been a trouble, thing that's hard for me to explain to people. But one time I actually saw a nurse that's going to come on my show talking about this, and somebody was saying, because it's actually become a pretty big story. We covered it, but it ended up getting picked up by Axios as well. Benny's, which
Mm-hmm.
is a big
Yes,
time retailer, they're carrying some
I
cannabis
read
drinks
that.
now.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, I
That's
lost
like a
my,
watershed moment in Illinois, by the way. I think
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a
it's
really,
big. It's
really
a
big
big
deal.
deal.
Oh, and
Yeah.
what this person was saying was, so I shared that, and they were saying, I'd rather go to the dispensary and get drinks, and because
Mm-hmm.
I want a high that I actually feel. These are lesser than what you'd find in
Yeah.
the dispensary. And the clinician basically just said, like, can you explain to me the difference molecularly and the dose that you're talking about? Because we're talking about like a 10 milligram drink, 10 milligram drink. It's Delta 9 THC. One is just hemp derived. And the reason they
Right.
call it hemp derived, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, in the case of drinks, I thought this was kind of funny. I've talked to a few different drink companies. Ultimately, the reason they call it hemp derived is because if you were to boil it down, it would legally be defined as hemp. There is
I
no
actually don't.
difference.
Yeah, I actually don't know if that's entirely correct, but I don't. I'm still sorting my way through a lot of this shit because I think
Fair.
it's up to interpretation. But what I understand it is at least from the natural when they well, so there's a difference between, and I don't like this terminology. This is what the DEA has used, right? Naturally derived D9 and synthetically derived
Mm,
D9.
mm.
Meanwhile, they both use a chemical process, right? So I don't,
Right.
none, but the difference is, and this is what I think you might be referring to, is that when they bring the hemp in for the naturally derived version, none of those plants theoretically are over 0.3% THC, right? So
Right.
that's why they're legal. They're being brought in that way, right? What comes out at the end of the process is where I think people are like, okay, well, if reversed it, you'd still be legal kind of
Hmm.
thing, because it came from the 0.3% THC. The synthetic version is even more, I guess, arguably legal, I guess, because it starts with CBD. So they're
Yeah.
taking CBD isolate and then they're converting that into D8. And then one more step is like D9. This is how, and by the way, this is how it's been explained to me by extractors. So I'm probably butchering some of it, but it's a layman's understanding. And I've
Sure.
seen the equipment, of course, um, but in that case, you're starting with CBD, which is legal under the Farm Bill. So that I think that the issue is whatever pops out at the end is where people are like, well, it's derived from something that is legal under the Farm Bill, so therefore it's legal under the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
But and especially, and that's where that language of the dry weight comes in too, because they never specified, when that plant material comes in, it's dry weight, right? And it's 0.3% THC or less. So that's how it comes into the facility.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's why it's legal, I think.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
ultimately view this all as, and I think everybody should, and I think, like I say, it's the kind of the point of your article. Everybody should embrace this because it is, whether or not it was the legislative intent, as people like to bring up, it's progress. Like, how can you not see this as progress? Some people are selling cannabis like nationally, accepting credit cards, getting funding. Go ahead.
I think we see it as progress, but I think the public sees it as scary. I
Mm,
mean, I'm a parent, I have two kids. My son is 12. Um, I have a niece who's going off to college and came home, last year with like a bag of gummies from a smoke shop that was like, I don't even know how many hundreds of milligrams, like, and that's scary because I have a high tolerance, but if a kid took, a 50 milligram hemp D9 gummy on accident, a kid who'd never, really had ever smoked or had an edible before, I mean, it would literally put them in the hospital probably. And like a panic attack is what they mostly get when kids end up in the hospital after eating a gummy. So no, is any of this deadly? No. You know what I mean? That's one of the beauties of the plant, right? But it could be really scary. And that's why I was saying for us, it's progress because we just want to see the plant and the medicine and the products be treated like they should be,
hmm.
regulated like alcohol. But as a parent, I didn't like the way. I'll tell you this, Cole. As a parent and as a lawyer, I did not like the way that this came about. And to your question earlier, I think maybe that's part of it too. Is like as a lawyer, we're taught to follow the law and, that there are right and wrong answers. And it doesn't feel great, I would say, as a lawyer, to take advantage of a loophole in the law that damn well that nobody meant to be there in the first place. It was an accident, literally an accident, by legislators who really didn't obviously have a firm grasp on what the language they were putting in, like how that could be interpreted, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say it's coming out to be, and what I keep reading now is it's coming out to be, crazy enough, it seems like the answer to all of it,
Right.
right? To federal legalization, to the whole enchilada. And we've all been we've been fighting it so hard on the regulated cannabis side for so long. Now, not only are you seeing this shift where people are open to using it in their products and distributing it, but people are saying it's the answer. Like people are now like, we're already federally legal. What do we need all this legalization mumbo jumbo
Right.
for? Which is also incredibly fascinating to see that evolution. Like, holy shit, we went from like hating them and wanting them to disappear to like they're the answer. It's nuts.
Right.
Only in cannabis, right?
Exactly. It's crazy. Like I say, well, and I don't want to like I'm not trying to push this topic off, but it is interesting how, at least in the case of Illinois, it seems like it's one of the only, actually, I think I can tie this in pretty well. It's one of the only, I would say, it's one of the strongest challenges to the limited license system. Like I've bitched about the limited license system from a consumer standpoint for years, but apparently that doesn't
Mhm.
matter. I'm just saying that kind of sarcastically.
No, I get it. I
Um,
get it.
but but like all of the sudden this hemp thing comes around and now it's like, so it started as what you were talking about, and this is how I'm going to tie it in because I want to hopefully we don't get too lost in this, but it started in Illinois. This conversation started about these high schoolers that bought just the exact scenario you laid out,
Yep.
and it was always pitched as this public health emergency, right? And people were freaking out, and it was just a story that wouldn't go away. People kept bringing it up, and so what the hemp growers did in our state, at least a lot of them, they partnered with a representative and they introduced legislation where they said, hey, we agree this is an issue, and as a result we would like to be regulated just like you are. So we
Hmm.
would be only be able to sell to 21 years of age or older, potency testing, and you can even tax us. They added that on. You can even tax us the way, because they always say the taxes are undercutting our, right? You remember I just read that at
Yeah.
the beginning.
Right.
So
Well,
it's like,
280E too is a nightmare, right? They don't want that. That's for damn sure.
yes. And the response was just basically no, because if you just gave every hemp operator a license, then that dilutes the market. And as a lot of social equity licensees say, is social equity is market share. So if you're taking away from their market share, you're
Yes.
taking away from their social equity.
Yes. I mean, you're essentially giving out more licenses, right?
Right.
Up to whatever the max is for the state, which is a couple hundred, I think.
So I
500?
bring that up.
Remember.
I like how we tied that in, like, because you bring up a point that was discussed in Illinois, and it's interesting that hemp operators came back with a solution, and basically it seems like it's just taken
Yeah.
in Illinois, it's taken
Air out of it a little.
the air out of it, because it no longer can you really argue it's a public health emergency, at least in Illinois, because they're like, hey,
Yeah.
regulate me,
Yeah.
I'm up for it.
Well, and it's
um
fascinating. I thought, Cole, I don't know if you saw this, but I thought it was really fascinating to watch, like, kind of what happened in Kentucky, which is,
mm,
where McConnell's from. And he's the
yeah,
architect of the Farm Bill, never obviously meant for any of this to happen, but he would never, ever ban it in Kentucky. I mean, I said this, he would never ban it in Kentucky because he would destroy, Kentucky's economy because there are a bazillion hemp growers there. So Kentucky just passed some pretty stringent, regulations around hemp and hemp products. You're now, I think, going to have to register in the state and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I didn't do like a deep dive into it, but I mean, it's substantial. And I think it's very telling that, a conservative state like Kentucky, when faced with the option of banning it altogether, chose not to, and that they're putting together, real regulations. And I think that will be a template, for a lot of other states to follow, to the extent they don't just fold the hemp products into the existing, cannabis framework in that particular state. But I think banning is not the answer. I think regulating is the answer. And to truthfully, the easiest answer is to regulate them the exact same way, because back to our original point, it's the same plant, right?
yeah, yeah.
But
And that's why I
but it
think
is it is hard though for the social equity applicants. Sorry to interrupt you. I just,
no, it's okay.
I get that, like, giving out all of these licenses when there are already, you know, licensees out there that can't even get their businesses stood up would be kind of brutal,
Right. Yeah, and I
you
mean
know?
that seems to just be the circle we spin around here in Illinois. It's like we want to end the cycle of criminalization, but complete decriminalization would mean, kind of open licensing
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that,
Which by the way is, not, I mean, look, I'm in New Mexico. We purposely never got into retail because we've all seen this movie before of what happens in unlimited license states with retail. And there are now over, I think, 600 retail licenses in the state for a state of 2 million people. I mean, we've got, how many dispensaries do we have open now? 130, 40, 50? I don't know, but some under 200 dispensaries for
Yeah.
12 million people, right?
Yeah.
So you can throw a rock in Albuquerque and hit like 4 dispensaries in a row. It's a bad look. It's bad for the market. Everybody's struggling because of it. So, unlimited license markets are not the answer either. It's just kind of mind blowing that nobody can get, you know, to a position, to a compromised, structure that kind of takes the best from the unlimited license markets and the best from the limited license markets and, meshes them together.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like, yeah, like if we want people to be able to participate and address the issues of criminalization, we have to give them an opportunity to participate by way of, being licensed and complying to regulations. And like you say, following the rules, your favorite thing to do as a lawyer, right? Um, but
But I will say to your point too before about, what's happening in Illinois is that it segues back into, the I don't disagree when people say like, yeah, giving all these people licenses would hurt the existing, social equity applicants and their ability to get their businesses stood up. But I also believe that there are a lot of things that could change in Illinois, like outdoor growing, for example, which you and I've talked about, that would help social equity applicants get up and running and then be able to have, compete realistically if other new licenses are granted to hemp growers or anybody else. So I just think there's a lot of ways that the Illinois market is really handcuffed right now,
yeah,
especially for the social equity craft growers and retail owners.
just really quick, because it's another question that has been like the theme of this podcast before we get to outdoor stuff and kind of wrap up this hemp conversation. I'm curious, just because you brought it up, and it's a perspective I hear all the time. Like from my perspective, the end all be all goal of legalization was to end arrests. But as you've said, and as other people say on this show all the time, it seems like people bring up this other goal, which is like the idea of kind of bluntly shielding operators from market forces. I feel like
Mm.
they want to prevent price compression. They want to prevent receivership or going out of business, which I think both you and I can agree. We would never wish financial hardship on anybody. But like really, it just seems weird that in cannabis we've even made that a goal when meanwhile in like the restaurant industry, we just accept that like 80% of businesses go out. They just go out of business within the
It's
first five
interesting.
years.
Yeah.
Like what I'm just curious though, what do you think is because you said I don't think open licensing is
The answer.
the answer either. And I'm guessing it was probably because of some of those reasons I just listed off. Where do you think that idea comes from with cannabis? Like just honestly asking, because you're not the only person that has ever said that needs to be a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did the failing. Yeah, it's interesting because I will tell you, I sit on a working group in New Mexico where it's a lot of legacy operators who want the governor to essentially pause on the issuance of new dispensary licenses, not like a seat end, but just like a breath, because there's just way too many of them, and it's not just hurting the legacy, you know, businesses, it's hurting the small businesses too. You can see all of their revenue numbers on their website, and they're not sustainable. Making less than $30,000 a month running a dispensary is not sustainable. So um, but there's a lot of people that I'll talk to in New Mexico that'll just say, look, that's capitalism, that's the market, right? People go in, they try their hand at it, they lose their business. That's it. I think um but I think it does tie back into what you were saying before, right? Because these social equity programs sprung out of a place of wanting to, essentially remediate some of the damage done by the war on drugs, right? And this acknowledgement that we've put a lot of people in prison for weed when we shouldn't have, right? And that it was predominantly, African American men that suffered. And so if you look at it from that perspective, and if you really want to get highfalutin about it, you could think about it even from the perspective of affirmative action, which of course the Supreme Court just shot down. But there's a piece of this where it's like, yeah, like these folks deserve an opportunity before everybody else, to have their hand at it. But and to your point, why should that be limited in any way? But I think there's also a responsibility for each state that does this um, to put together a structure that is, I don't know, that people can actually have a business in. I mean, everyone, when you make it so easy to get a license, people go and get them, and then they spend their life savings. And so is there, I would like to see something that's somewhere in between. I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing, for example, for people to have to show that they have some money in the bank before they get a license so that they can reasonably succeed. I mean, I think a lot of people would say that that's like Big Brother-esque, like, and it should just be free market. But, I don't know. I'll give you another example. This is maybe a better example. Our farm is in a little town in Estancia, New Mexico, with 1,500 people in it. There's no grocery store. There's no bank. There's no restaurants except for like a McDonald's, Taco Bell, fried chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken place, like 15 minutes away. But there's 2 dispensaries. Why? Why are there 2 dispensaries? I mean, you know, could for example, a simple population study tell you after 38 plus states have come online, how many people can, how can a dispenser, how many people does a dispensary need to have, right, to stay in business in that state? What does that population look like? Then if they fail, then it's on them. But at least they haven't been set up for failure with having 14 dispensaries next to them to compete with, right?
Yeah.
And and some of that zoning and stuff, like in New Mexico, for example, they just make exceptions to all the zoning laws. You want to be near a school? Fine. You want to be in a park? Fine. You want to be near 3 other dispensaries? Fine. It's like, what's the point? I mean, they all see dollar signs, but at the end of the day, if none of them can have a functional business because they're all in competition with each other, they all go out of business, there are no dollars, right? So I just feel like there's got to be some rationality to it. But I understand the counter argument, which is capitalism, and you either succeed or you fail.
Yeah. And for me, it's honestly less about the capitalism. I mean, that's definitely like, I feel like a convincing argument. Some people would say to like some of the things you said, like with regard to people getting set up in, almost like not a dispensary desert, but a dispensary abundance area. They would say, well, the invisible hand's gonna sort that out.
You're
Um,
right.
my thing, and I guess really quick before I shift to my main thing on limited licenses, or my main contention on limiting licenses,
Mm.
which, like I said, doesn't have to do so much with capitalism, but really quick, Oregon. I've spoken to the lead. He was the lead commissioner at Oregon's like liquor and cannabis commission or control or something. I'm not sure exactly the acronym, but anyways, Oregon's always used as a
Right. OCCM, MDC. I mean, there's so many, right?
right,
CCD, right?
right. I think it's
IDFPR,
OLCC, but I might
PUA.
exactly though.
Pick your poison.
We have so many. There could be like a little scatter plot of
Oh my God,
acronyms,
seriously.
but
And then all the different names for hemp and cannabis, hemp and regulated cannabis thrown in there just for added confusion.
right. So he said, because I asked him about this, and it wasn't an original question. It was something I had heard on Vice. Like, would you have allowed open markets to flourish the way it did when Oregon, first opened up? And he said, of course, it wasn't his choice. He's just the regulator. But if you were asking his personal opinion, he said, yeah, he would have done it again. And while, again, people had it tough, it was like this idea that people knew what they were getting into, or at least they should have. Like you just pointed out, maybe some people don't, and maybe some people walk in blind, but it's like the way he explained it was he'd much rather that and you lose your shirt rather than not even being able to wear your shirt, which he didn't say it that way. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that argument, at least the last part of it, flies if it doesn't take 6 years and like destroy your life. You know what I mean? Like so much of these licenses, like in Illinois, were held up for 3 years plus in litigation.
Right.
And that is a long time for to sustain partnerships, relationships, plans, money. I mean, and to say that, I mean, I'm sure if you asked most of the social equity applicants in Illinois, they would have told you they never in a million years could imagine that the licenses would have been held up that long. And the other piece of it is that people don't, maybe the per capita numbers that I told you before, or maybe the limited license model would work better if it weren't for 280E, because that's really the kicker, right? And why these businesses can't stay afloat, because whatever margin they make is getting eaten up by the taxes they have to pay. So I think I guess that's just one example where I'm saying there's other factors, at play to why a limited license or unlimited license market works or doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like what would an unlimited license market look like if 280E didn't exist? Right. And if people could, for example, bank normally.
It looked like hemp.
Right. Right. It would. Yes. Exactly. Right. And that's why people did that. But
Come
good
full
point.
circle.
Touche. Yes. But I guess my point is it's hard to even know necessarily
Sure.
what models work best, because we have these other factors that are so significant floating around us at all times, whether it's the taxes or the banking or just the fact that everything we do costs more. Our programs and our software are typically inferior. Like we can't use, not that people necessarily want to, but we can't use like Workday or Paylocity or
I somebody was
any of these
asking me this
fancy
the other day.
systems. Like,
Somebody was
yeah, we can't
asking
do
me
any of that.
why the point of sale at dispensaries suck all the time. And I was like,
Uh,
it's gotta
I,
be because they have to have certain
they
vendors or
cobble
something.
together. No, it's all cobbled together.
Uh,
Everything that has been created as a workaround to to credit card processing has
sure.
been created in like it's literally like a duct taped. It's like these different systems. That's what Dutchy was trying to solve, right?
uh,
But by like kind of making it one stop shopping and having a system that actually is integrated and works together. I don't think I don't know that much about it. I'm not sure they succeeded, but
mhm.
yes, it's a messed up system with these different pieces. And now what you find is that like the one that's good at e-commerce now wants to get into payments. So then they launch their own payments, but they're again, everyone's cash strapped because of 280E and the market being in the shitter. So it's all done on these shoestring budgets and nothing works right. I mean, as a result, and it's a lot of outside factors that come into play, unfortunately, and things that you can't even anticipate.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say really quick as we wrap up, just I've had so much fun with you today, and I hope you've had
Me
fun too.
too. Me too.
Okay.
I love talking about this shit. Nobody wants to talk to me about it anymore.
Well, we should,
I mean,
yeah,
my family for sure.
we should do this again sometime. I've really enjoyed my time
Yes.
with you. So,
Yeah.
really quick, just because you brought up Mitch McConnell, I like to show this picture of him with his hemp
Um,
pen. Um,
I love it.
anyways, this
Oh, it
this
couldn't
is
happen to a nicer guy that he gets tied to cannabis. His legacy will be forever tied to weed for the rest of his miserable life, right?
right.
Oh,
It's
wow.
hilarious. He
How
definitely did
much?
not. So this is my main contention with the limited license market, and it just seems to be like a universal constant in each state that, and I don't know, maybe this problem's
Wow.
bigger than me, but like my point is the criminal justice system seems to be the main enforcement mechanism, especially in states that have limited license markets like Illinois, because these are seen as
Yeah.
operators that are unlicensed, and that is the enforcement mechanism. Instead of it being like a potential business offense, which is what I've talked to some defense attorneys about, like, you know,
Yep.
depending, on the relative damage you may cause to society. But you
Hmm.
very rarely, unless it rose to that level, would you find yourself thrown in a cage. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Um,
Which is good, which is progress, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah. And the point is you'd hope that for cannabis. Look, I know that we just talked it like obviously we don't like you're talking about unregulated sales and everything else. So when you look at these products like that, this is in like vacuum seal bags or something. It doesn't look very, but
No.
um my point is these just look like entrepreneurs, not these are the cops. They look like they got into the bag, honestly, if you look at
Yeah,
them.
they do. They do.
But
They do.
this load looks like
Yeah.
just a young entrepreneur that maybe couldn't get a license. I don't know, maybe I'm making assumptions, but I just feel like it sucks that trafficking continues to be dealt with in that manner in Illinois because it's still criminal law that comes into play. So that's really my problem with the limitations on licenses is that like you can't get in the business if you want to. And so if you just do it the way you always did it, before 2019, um, you get met with something like that, you know. And
Yeah.
I just want to say really quickly, like I generally am supportive of regulation, but I do have to say that like I think we need to I don't know how to put this exactly. It's a thought that's been spinning around in my head for a while, so forgive me if it's a bit raw, but I'm just going to test it out on you and see what you think. It just
Love it.
seems like cannabis has been trafficked for years. And as we've always said, without little issue, nobody dies from cannabis, right? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying, I'm just saying though that like I'm not saying that regulation isn't necessary, but if it's been happening for all those years without all of this seed to sale and stuff, like again, I'm not saying we just have to rip out the system just because of what I said, but like also like let's be a little real here.
More, yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm, there are regulations that I think are necessary and there are regulations that I think are not. And
Hmm.
maybe not just, maybe they're not necessary. Maybe they're, in my mind, not even smart, or maybe they're even detrimental, like the inability to grow outdoors in Illinois. I
Yes.
completely disagree with that. I think it's detrimental to the market. I think there is so much that could be done there. But you know, I'm also a mom, and and I don't, as much as I would rather have my children someday smoke weed than drink alcohol, because I think alcohol is a far more damaging and dangerous substance. But I also would like them to wait till their brains are developed, to
Yeah.
do that ideally,
Yeah.
and not have access to it all the time. But
Right.
it's also just part of our culture, Cole, which I think, is a whole nother conversation, right? Like we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see how weed unfolds like across Europe, because they've always had a more lax, relationship with drugs and alcohol and wine at dinner with their kids. And you know what I mean? Like, so I just think we're a very like rigid, uptight society in general. And we think we have to regulate everything, and sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And there's got to be a someplace in between. It's all.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, you brought it up a few
Yeah.
times, and thank you because you said really kind things about some of my work on this. Folks, if you didn't know, I released what I'm
This
calling an
was blew my
exclusive
mind.
because
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen this reported in the media. Um, so there are two people that, from what I've heard, are cultivating outdoors in Illinois. One facility is Nature's Grace and Wellness, which this photo is actually from a different website that I found. And this is actually what inspired me to really take a look into this because people that told me that
Wow.
this was going on kind of secretively, they told me this was going on. This is what they described the facility as looking at like, but I wanted to see it first, and when I saw this picture, I'm like, that's it. That's what they were talking about. And so ultimately,
Blows my mind.
yeah, ultimately we got these photos, which are of cannabis growing inside of that facility outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
which if I could just really quick, and then I'd like to
Yeah.
hear why you found this intriguing. That's exceptional, folks, because while you might find cannabis growing in greenhouses, which some might argue is close to growing outdoors, there's no facility, there's only two facilities rather, that I'm aware of that have the ability to do like as close to an outdoor grow as you can get. And so if you're listening to the podcast and couldn't see this structure, it's just a screened in structure with cameras around it. And otherwise you're just outside. I call it a trip to Home Depot, by the way, because when you
Hmm.
look at something like this facility,
Yeah.
this is like
Yeah.
a multi-month project.
Hmm.
It takes a long time. And then even when you get it set up, you've got all these temperature control stuff on it, for lack
Yep.
of better words. I'm not an
Yep.
engineer. HVAC systems, I think that's the technical term. You've got to get
Hmm.
your environment under control. So it's not like just
Right.
because you built the building, it's ready to go. There's a whole
No.
process. But this,
Right.
you go to Home Depot, you buy some fucking tent poles and some netting, and by the end of the week, you can grow cannabis. And so when we talk about social equity craft cultivators not being able to grow anything and stand up their facility, I've been thinking, well, this is the answer. Throw them a
It is
bone
the
here.
answer.
But I'm
I
curious. Well,
think it's
how?
a figure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm a little long-winded. I've been smoking weed. Um, uh, I'm just curious. Yeah, how did you find out about this? Why'd you find it interesting? Just curious.
I've been talking to Cole Eastman, my partner in Dynamic Jack, about this because he is part of a craft grower license and, like many, has struggled to get off the ground. Of course, the irony there is we would love to have Dynamic Jack products in Illinois, and we have the brand, and he's got a craft grow, and we can't do anything with either one of them to get us together because of the money. But after 2 years of practicing in of operating in an unlimited license market where people grow outside, I I think at some point I must have mentioned it to Cole as like, this is the answer. Like, why, if we let the craft growers grow outside, they can get up and running, and then they can get some money, and then they can build an indoor if they want to, but at least they can have, an operational business. And the answers. And so Cole was like, you're right. And it was during that time period where I think the omnibus bill was up that got, kind of sidetracked by the kids with the hemp gummies that we talked about before. And they were talking about, increasing the square footage, the canopy square footage. And I'm like, that's great. But if you let them grow outdoors, that, increasing the canopy maybe helps with investment, right? And making the margins work ultimately if you can grow at a certain price. But like, if you told them tomorrow you can go grow outside, well, maybe not tomorrow because it's the winter now, but in the spring, but the responses I get is it'll never happen. It's a security concern, and the MSOs will never let it happen because then it would be, competition to them. My answer to that is pretty simple. And by the way, I call myself, I'm an MSO baby. Like, I grew up in the Illinois market in an MSO. That was my first entry into the cannabis industry, right? Is here. My second was Dynamic Jack in a completely different market. Um, but I think the answer is to allow the craft growers to grow outside and then give them like a 2 year head start and then let the MSOs jump in. Because the other piece of this, in my opinion, and again, I'm just one person and I don't know shit, but I think Illinois is ultimately going to have a real problem and get crushed by Michigan and other states that do allow outdoor growing because the weed is half the price and it's better. I know a lot of people already that go over to Michigan to get product and come back because it's half the price and it's better weed. So Michigan, if Michigan can grow outside, the first time I saw a farm called Grasshopper Farms in Paw Paw, Michigan. It was the only outdoor farm I ever saw before Dynamic Jack. And I was like, I gotta see this. I'd seen pictures of it online and I was like, I gotta see this place. It was stunning, stunning. And Will Bowden, who's the guy, who runs it, he's such a proponent of outdoor that he actually built an indoor grow on the property just to prove that the indoor weed wasn't better than the outdoor weed. So I just think that is the answer, and it benefits the MSOs too, because if they don't all start getting into that, look, outdoor is the cheapest way to grow. And we all know weed is a commodity, right? There's going to be your top tier, your bottom tier, everything in between. There's going to be stuff grown just for extract, which is what a lot of people do it with outdoor.
Right.
Um, and so if Illinois wants to compete, our growers got to learn to grow outside. They don't know how. They don't
Yeah.
have any idea how to grow outdoors, and they're going to get crushed.
And I mean, if you look online at the Illinois Department of Agriculture, they talk about how Illinois is a leading producer of different
Yeah.
agricultural products. The state's climate and varied soil types enable farmers to grow and raise many other
They're missing
agricultural
an
commodities.
opportunity. They're
Yep.
missing a big opportunity for Illinois. And there's, like I said, I believe there's a way to do it where everybody benefits. You let the craft growers go first, then you let the MSOs get in the game, and then everybody's growing outside. Nobody's going to come and raid your farm and steal your weed. You know,
Yeah.
they're so scared about the security, and it's like, hemp growers grow outside. People grow outside in other states. Nobody,
And I got asked because I shared this on like different weed forums, and one of the questions that I got, because this is a long article, so thank you again for reading it. Um,
Well, and I want to know your take too. I want to hear like your thoughts on what I just said too,
yeah,
and
well,
on
I mean, I
the
completely
situation.
agree. That's exactly why I wrote. I don't. That's not the primary reason I wrote it, but it was just like just because I've been talking to all these craft cultivators, everything you just said was exactly what I was thinking when I was writing this. But to just be completely candid, one of the many people have asked me, and it was particular like I found it notable in a community of cannabis consumers. They were like, "Why should I care about this as a cannabis consumer? It seems like the typical Illinois rigmarole." I don't know. They didn't say exactly that, but basically that. And I said, the reason you should care is because if two people or two entities are allowed to grow outdoors right now, why can't I as a medical patient? Because in Illinois, and by the way, I'm sorry, I was speaking to you as if I didn't realize you knew so much. Like you were saying that you knew about the omnibus thing and all. I didn't realize you were like,
Oh, no, but you know
and you
more than
said,
I do for sure.
but did you say you're in Chicago too right now or something?
I am in Chicago right
Okay,
now. I
so
just got
see,
back
I
from New
was talking to
Mexico.
you like you weren't even from Illinois and stuff. I knew
Yeah.
you were from Illinois, but I didn't know. So my apologies.
No, it's
I
fine.
was
Oh my
trying to
gosh,
like
it's
fill
fine.
in the blanks, but I've got these
Mm-mm.
tents behind me, in order to stay compliant. Well, you can only see one.
Yep.
And my weird curtains because I had an air conditioning unit there. I do that to remain compliant with the law, but I'd love to be able to take advantage of the natural elements, and obviously
I mean,
two entities
100%.
can. So
You
why
could
can't
grow
I?
plants on your freaking deck. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, it's a silly construct, and it's not,
And that
you
was
know,
my primary reason for writing it. Ultimately, though, I was just kind of like, I
I'm so
heard.
glad that you did. When I saw it, I was like, finally, someone else who's like, thinks the way I think about it.
Yeah, because my
And Cole
question
too.
was, do I have to do that at home? Do I need to go to Home Depot and get some tent poles and some cameras and some netting? Will that allow
Well,
me
I,
to
I
grow
will
it
I
outdoors?
will tell you one thing. It's a lot harder to stand up a farm from a patch of dirt like we did in than just going to Depot, but
Sure.
it is a lot cheaper and a lot more simple, especially, in a micro, and if you have a good growing environment and all that.
Hmm.
And consumers, I think, will care about it, are starting to care about it from an environmental perspective, just in terms of the amount of light usage and waste and all that goes on, at the big indoor facilities. And so, people care about that stuff, and they also care about, um, just look at the organic revolution, everybody wanting their food to come and, come as close to from the earth as possible and all of that. I mean, that's outdoor weed, that's nature,
Hmm.
right? And of
Yeah.
course, I'm sure you've read articles and things about like the terps and stuff that they find in sun grown plants versus indoor. So I just think all around it would just be such a great solution if they had offered that up at any point, or even now, or it won't happen, but for the spring, to our growers. Look at all these craft growers. We could have beautiful outdoor weed by the fall,
Right.
but we won't.
Let it grow. Let it
Let it
grow.
grow. Exactly. And I think the other part of that, Cole, too, and this is what I asked Charlie Batchel a question about this at a Grown In event. Actually, it was just like, are you taught like Cresco is one of the biggest companies, right? So they are one who can afford like a Washington lobbyist, right?
Hmm.
Who goes to Washington and talks to people about legalizing weed. But I asked him, I'm like, are you talking to your West Coast counterparts? The bigger companies in California and Oklahoma and those the unlimited license state operators that have survived and thrived. whatever that means in cannabis these days. Are you talking to them? Because, if you're locking arms with your counterparts on the West Coast and then you're talking to, federal legislators, it would seem that you would have more, power and more sway. And the answer I got was basically our priorities are different. So no, we're not really talking
Mm,
to each other. And I just feel like it's a lost opportunity because it's that's how I came up with this idea that probably maybe will never see the light of day. But like, I never in a million years would have thought that like outdoor growing could be an answer to the craft growers and their inability to get stood up. I never thought that. I never would have thought of that had I not had the experience growing outdoors in New Mexico.
yeah.
So I just think it's a shame that we're not all talking to each other because, yeah, we might have somewhat different priorities, but at the end of the day, I think we all kind of want the same thing, which is to be able to operate
What,
our businesses normally and cross state lines, right?
yeah, what do you think the difference in priorities might be?
Well, for example, California and Oklahoma would love to give all their weed to places like Illinois,
Oh,
and we don't
true. I was
want it.
just, yeah, true.
We don't want their weed flooding our market, or at least we, the MSOs don't, but really any business. I mean, God, they're already struggling. Can you imagine if tomorrow the weed started flowing in from California?
Mm,
Who would smoke the MSO? I mean, no, right? I mean, it could be really bad. So that's what I mean by the priorities are different. California has an overabundance of weed and would love to put it elsewhere. Illinois doesn't, and then you have limited license states that are like, hell no, keep your weed to yourself. So, I think that's definitely a conflict, but that doesn't mean that they're not in agreement on other things, right?
yeah. Well, one of the last questions I have for you, because I feel like I've used a lot of your time,
I love it. I'd love talking to you. It's been great.
cool. Again, we have to do this. We have to do this
Yes.
again. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious, you brought up being a lawyer and this person that I actually found your article off of another person that was a lawyer, and they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about hemp and stuff. And I'm just curious, as a lawyer, but also as a cannabis advocate, this is the big idea that I've had with hemp that I feel like you said, it's almost like for us it's a big win, but maybe for others it's not viewed that way. But I'm just curious, just one last thought on that on this topic. Um, this person was basically saying that hemp should be for industrial purposes, not getting high. They were saying that that is not the intent of the law. And someone else responded by saying, like, whatever the case may be, I hope that you're not suggesting that finding workarounds to escape prohibition is somehow bad. And it's this weird
Yeah.
legal and ethical debate
Right.
here. Like, seems like something that would be in like a college class.
Yeah.
It's like
Totally.
what's the law and what's the intent, but what's right? What's and
Yep. Well, I think that's what, I get it as a lawyer. It's like, I mean, it'd be like I always joke around that um, how you can't vote if you're a convicted felon,
yeah.
but like you could still be the president of the United States. I always joke that's a typo. And like someone clearly forgot to write that you can't vote if you're a convicted felon and you can't be president if you've been a convicted felon. I'm like, it's a typo. Someone just needs to fix it.
Yeah.
But that's my little analogy. But I I don't know. I don't know. I think to your point earlier, 2 years ago, I would have been like, nope, I'm not getting into that freaking loophole. I'm a lawyer. I went through this, I did this the right way. I got my licenses, I paid for them, I did it. You know what I mean? I would have been like, no way. Um, but in all honesty, like, I mean, this is gonna sound horrible, but like desperation opens your mind a little bit more, maybe to some things that like you wouldn't have considered before. And maybe desperation is a hard word, but you know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah.
surviving, and all of a sudden you're reading these things and you're like, okay, it's a loophole, but like, okay, that's on them. They wrote it.
Exactly.
I didn't write it,
And when
you
you see
know?
that they're just not
And I'm not
enforcing
supposed to
it,
know I don't read their minds. Yeah, this is what I'm sure they didn't intend this, but like, you know, again,
and
to your
they're
point before, such is life,
right, and they're
right?
not enforcing it in line with what we usually perceive to be their
Exactly.
intentions. So it's like,
Exactly.
again, it comes
Exactly.
back to that point we started with. It's almost, what did you say in your article? put your life vest on and get
Start
with it, or
swimming.
yeah, start
Yeah,
swimming.
start swimming. Yeah, I think the fact that they had an opportunity to close that loophole and they didn't, and they kicked it, that was a rubber stamp to everyone. And now the gates are wide open. You're going to see this is the year of hemp D9 and really starting to take over, I think.
Yeah, and I want to give you the space to close, but I always wonder like that kick and then also even the legislation.
Mm.
People always say it wasn't the intent, but did they even write the bill anyway? Like usually all these bills are just provided to
Right.
legislators anyway. So like maybe that was the legislative intent. But like, yeah, did
If
Mitch McConnell mean it when he
right.
was signing it? Like, did he think, oh, this
Mitch
is
McConnell definitely didn't, but it would be a
right,
pretty hilarious joke if the other people were in on it and, and
right? They're
somehow
like,
knew that this was going to happen.
we're gonna be
I
smoking
doubt it, but
THCA weed. Yeah.
exactly.
So
THCA weed cracks me up. I'm like, so wait, it's not weed until you light it on fire, and then it's weed. I'm
right.
like, what? See, I can't even make heads or tails of this stuff. And again, I was like, THCA, no way. Well, now I'm like, well, look at this person and that person. What are they doing? And so, who knows? Never say never. That never say never, and should be a motto in this industry. And also, you know how people say hope is not a strategy. Hope
Yeah.
is not a strategy unless you're in cannabis.
That's awesome.
That's going to be my tagline. That, and
Well,
I must have been high when I took this job. That's going to be the name of my book.
I'm gonna steal that quote. That's awesome.
Oh.
Well, I want to give you the space. Anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about? I know we covered all stars on the map, but
No, I enjoyed this. We got to get together offline with my other Cole
yes,
and
smoke
have
some and have
a proper session, a proper sesh.
yes, absolutely. I would love that. So
Me too. Thank you
cool.
so much, Cole, and thank you for writing that great article and like doing that. I don't, it's crazy. I mean, look, it's not their fault, I guess, that they were grandfathered into this, but to know that that's been going on this whole time while like we keep being told you can't grow outside, it's pretty, that was pretty good reporting. Major kudos to you. That was a scoop.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. And it deserves more attention. So I hope that it does get it. I hope that the conversation continues because this is the thing that could, I mean, when I saw it, I immediately wanted to send it to like Brad Spearenson because I've been talking to him about this and like this could be the thing that could actually like potentially make change happen, your article. So good job.
Thank you so much.
Very impressive.
And folks, I hope you found as much value in this conversation as I did. Um, Allie, we got to do it again. Definitely
Definitely.
podcast, but as you said, we got a sesh, and
Mm-hmm.
really looking forward either way to the next time that we connect. So,
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for having me, Cole. Appreciate
yep.
it.
Take
All
care,
right. Have
everybody.
a good day. Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
Bye.